Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Nicole with Made from Scrap, and today I'm going to do a tutorial using this Schoolhouse Memories paper collection from Country Craft Creations. This is the 8x8 paper collection, and we're going to make a little mini junk journal. I went ahead and pulled out some papers from that collection that I'm planning on using so that I can have them ready for this tutorial. Just a few. I have 6 pages here, and I've selected which one I want to use for my front cover as well, so that I put that one aside. I'm just going to put those aside for a moment. I have a couple of the ephemera pieces from the collection already fussy cut out that I did with another project, and then I have some just like odds and ends from prior project as well that I kept with this paper collection to use. So I'm going to set that aside. I have my 2 pieces for the cover that are chipboard, and these measure 5 by 5. And then I have my spine piece here that's going to go in the middle for measuring 1.5 inches by 5 inches high. For the covers of the cardstock, you're going to need 2 sheets that measure 7 by 7. That gives us an inch border all the way around both of them. And then for the spine piece, you're going to need a piece that measures 4.5 inches wide by 7 inches tall. And those measurements are based on the spacers that you can pick up at Country Craft Creations. These are the 1-inch spacers that we use for the lay flat binding method, and the 1.5 inch spacer that we use for the spine. This little mini junk journal that I made, this is the 5 by 5, and I used the music box collection available from Country Craft Creations. I used a die from my stash and a couple different things from my stash. This is one of the Prima flowers that's available at Country Craft Creations. Here is the side spine. You'll see that use of seam binding for the binding method of these signatures, which is just what fancy word for the inside pages. And here is the back. I used some metal filigree pieces for the corners of my album as well. So when you open it up, you have just the inside front cover that I did some decorating of. You get to do your scavenging through your supplies in your house, junk that you've received in the mail that you want to repurpose. All those types of things are no holds bar, up to you and what you want to put in your album. So for me, I just kept this flat. And then I have, like I said, my 2 signatures. So I have basically 2 pages here, each of them using that seam binding, and the way that we put this through just has that seam binding here. So if I really wanted to, I could still take these pages out, flip them out, add more in, that type of thing. It's snug enough to hold everything in, but loose enough to be able to pull it out. So I'll start with the front page here. This is some of that paper collection from the music box. And when I scored the pages, and I'll show you in the tutorial, when I scored the pages, I just didn't score halfway through, so that I had this overlap here with some of the underlying pages that you could see some of that beautiful paper collection. So here's the front, and then I went ahead and put some cardstock here so that I could show off this any of my pages, but I kept it open underneath so I could also use it as a tuck spot and put a photo there. This is just a scrap piece of other paper that I had in my stash, the 1/2 inch strips that I had off of another collection, and I love that coloring with it, so I made it look like a piece of washi tape. I did use Distress Ink Vintage Photo for all the edges here. This is another sheet right here, and this goes all the way through. You'll see the back, the other side of this sheet as we flip through. Here's some cardstock that I thought the color looked really good, and I've just used some elements out of my stash. I like to rip out pages from old books and repurpose those so that I get to enjoy those. So this is a botanical book. You'll see some of that throughout, like this one. I went ahead and just folded this up. Isn't this pretty? Okay, folded up, stuck it in a glassine bag that I went ahead and cut the end of it so that I could use that as a tuck spot. Then I went ahead and glued one of the ephemera pieces, this is from the collection, right onto that glassine bag, and some of the lace that's available at Country Craft Creations there. Here's another page from the collection. I'm going to turn this over, and you can see that I just used one of the ephemera pieces that I fussy cut, and I glued that down on the page, and this is just from a music book, so Morning Praise. I love this paper too. This is all from the collection. I just scored it so that I have a piece here. I can always stick a little journaling piece of cardstock there if I wanted to, but I love the different colors here that are playing on each other. Okay, then you have the other side of that glassine bag, and here's another piece from the paper collection, so I just cut it, scored it down the middle, and can use it as a little booklet and tuck that in there. Decorated the outside of that glassine bag, and here's the other side of that piece of paper, and then the cardstock. Torn edge on the end here, and then use some little gemmy things from my stash. And this is the other side of those papers. So I'll show you how to do that. Additional ephemera pieces. Here's a little tuck spot that I have here. Made a little pocket, and then I added another little element here from my just scrap pieces, just for some interest, but I use this as a little tuck spot as well. So you have a dual tuck spot here and here. We'll go over that. Okay, use a piece of leftover cardstock, Artisan Cardstock. Just went ahead and used my tiny attacher there, just to give some interest to make a little tab. Okay, more glassine bag, cardstock on the edge, just to decorate the edge of that glassine bag, and then another piece of ephemera from the collection. Here's a piece from a magazine, a botanical magazine, that I went ahead and ripped out, and then I folded it just like you would do a letter, so that you could make another little tuck spot in here. So here's another piece from the collection that I just scored in half and can tuck away there. Old paper, again the tiny attacher. Here's the middle of that second signature, just some decorative on the edge here, and I glued it so that I could use that as a tuck spot there. Okay, and then this is the other side of that paper where I just folded it in half, and so I have a little spot there. The other side of that magazine piece. And then here's another piece from the collection. So I went ahead and glued these together to make another little tuck spot in there. Here's the flap. Glassine bag to stick more in. So I cut off the ends so that it basically makes a tube for that glassine bag. Went ahead and used some of the border strip from the paper collection just to give some interest there and have some room for a photograph. And then this is the back side. I wanted to make sure to show that beautiful piece of the collection. And here I just used another piece of decorative paper, folded it over. This happened to be the back side of this one. I used my sewing machine to put a decorative stitch on the outside, on the either side, so that it could be a pocket. And then that's another piece of ephemera. So we're going to go through how to use the seam binding method for you to have this little junk journal, mini junk journal. I think it's fun. It's an easy project to put together and give away as a present to do once we have our album lay flat put together, if that's what you're using, is to go ahead and cover the spines. Now that we have that, your choice as to whether or not you want to put the pages on the inside or not. But we're going to go ahead and punch the holes that our seam binding will be used to go through. So I'm going to use this crocodile that I have, and it has 2 hole sizes on it for punching. I'm going to use the smaller one, and then it also has a measurement over here on the side and a guide. So it says inch on the side there, and I'm going to push that up, and I'm going to use this in the first location so that I can go ahead and find the point at which I want to punch the holes. I'm also going to go ahead and just find the center. Now I usually do this by eye. just because it doesn't really, to me, mean that I need to do a whole lot. Remember, it's 1.5 inches and it's a junk journal, so it doesn't have to be all that precise, but I'm just trying to evenly space it. So I'm going to have 3/4 of an inch, I'm going to have 3/8 of an inch over here, somewhere in this location, somewhere in this location is good enough. Okay, so at least I know the gist of where I'm going to place this. Now, again, I'm going to use my guide. The further in that you punch your hole, the smaller the pages are going to be with this method. So you want to try to keep it as close to the edge as you can without going too far. The other thing I think it is worth noting is that for ease of cutting these pages, because I'm using the 8x8 paper collection, I want to keep my pages 4 inches in height. That means I want the holes to be spaced out a little bit further than 4 inches. So if you go ahead and use your centering ruler, that way, you know, give yourself an idea of how far you want those holes to stay apart. Then here to here, the 2 and 2 on this centering ruler would mean that's 4 inches, and I want to make sure that my holes are just outside of that 4 inches, so on either side of that 2-inch mark. So for me, I mark that, and I'm going to find where my dot was, center it in the small hole, and then I'm going to use this guide, push this guide up so that it will help me with the other holes. So I am 3/8 of an inch. So 3/8 of an inch is where I set my guide. I'm going to line up where I made my mark for my hole, and I'm going to go ahead and punch. Okay, it's going all the way through. I'm going to line up the other one here, and I'm eyeballing side to side, but I'm using that guide, and I get to punch that hole. So now I have 2, and I want to make sure to line those up on the other side. Again, I'm using that guide and centering it, and then centering it here. Okay, so that I have those straight across. So now I have my 4 holes, and that is how I'm going to use my seam binding, but then I'm going to build my pages. So let's go ahead, I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. Outside. Now for the inside pages. I went ahead, again, I'm using the 8x8 paper collection. This is the paper that I chose. I went ahead and laid the page down, just as if I was using this page. Laid it down here to where I wanted the edge to be and where the top edge would be. And then I came over to the side and I made a little tick mark with my pencil, and then I made a little tick mark with my pencil. I cut this horizontal piece first because the only thing I used this tick mark for was the spot to fold the paper over. So I cut it to horizontal length, and then I folded this paper over. On this version, I'm going to use this as a flap. On the music box, I use this as a pocket. I just cut it a little shorter than the 8 inches. So I cut 1 inch off, and that way I had more space to use as a pocket. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and glue this down. that I did the walkthrough on. Hope you enjoy this channel, but there we go. There's my 2 flaps, and now I have these pieces to put in. So for the base pages of this signature, I mentioned that I had already pulled out, and I set this aside for a minute. I had already pulled out a few sheets, and I want to go ahead and cut those. So I have my little cutter here, and I'm cutting them down on this is directional paper, so you have to be careful of how you cut it. I'm going to cut it down at the 4-inch mark. Okay. Now, let's do this one. There we go. Okay. So what you can do is, if you want your pages to show a little bit reveal, like I showed you here, then make sure that you don't fold them in the exact same location. Offset them just a little bit, however much you want it to be offset. I'm going to use my grid mat, and if I have these offset about a 1/2 inch, then I would be able to see a 1/2 inch of that. Okay. You don't always have to use the same height paper as well. If I wanted to stick another one on there, I could stick another one on there. If I wanted to have a little bit of different interest in color, just have a little bit different interest in color. And then you're going to decide from your longest length one, where is your fold going to be? So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and use these 2. I'm only going to have about 3/8 of an inch overlap. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold this so that this outside one is offset. The inside one is folded in half. And I'm going to burnish. When I open that up, this is the page I have on the inside where I can see a little bit of the reveal there. Okay. And on the front portion, I have this overlap where I can see just that 3/8 inch of a reveal. Okay, the most important part is that when it's folded, it's going to fit in your book. So as long as it's less than 5 inches, and I like it to be even less than that, so in this case I'm trying to make sure it's less than 4.5, then it will fit in your book. And it will fit just like this, in between those holes that you punched right there. Okay, now some of the other things we like to do are, these glassine bags are given to us with Country Craft Creations when you order seam binding from them. Okay, different little elements. So you can make sure to tuck this in. I'm just going to fold it wherever I wanted. And what I showed is that I like to use these as side pockets. So I'll take this end, and you can either try to open it up, or I just cut it off the end. And now I can use this as the other end. And both are pockets. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that in here. Okay, and you're just going to build your layers. Just like that. You're going to build your layers. Now I have my old paper. Here's another thing. I have my old paper, and I want this to sit in here. So I'm going to be folding it. I want it to be in the center section. Okay. If I want to use both of these sections of paper, I'm going to go ahead and split this down the middle. So I will stick my metal edge ruler. Use it like a tear tape. It doesn't have to be the same size as your base pages, so I might decide to just come up here a little, and then I will use that pressing down on the ruler and tear the page. And now I have this. Now I'm not going to put it right in the center because the title is right in the center. So I think what I'll do is I'll offset it just a hair so that my center fold, press down here, is just off. Okay, I'm not going to forget about this glassine bag. So we're building the layers. This is for the first signature. Now I have this one. You see it's a little bit too tall still, so I'm going to go ahead and use this ruler again. I have place this down, hold it down. Doesn't have to be straight. Signature somewhat together. Now this is just a mini, so you know these are small. A few pages, right? Interesting here. They're going to be lining up like so. I can use this on the second signature, and then we're going to be stringing. So keep building, the seam binding, keep building through. So what I'm going to do is take the end of my seam binding, and I'm going to start from the outside. Fold and burnish that middle. Okay. I'm going to leave enough. There is that leftover here piece. I have a 4x8. I'm gonna go ahead and burnish that. And I folded that one. It happened to be right in half. Okay, so I'm leaving. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stick this about right there as well. 7.5 inches, 7 inches, something like that. Okay, so once I have that strung through, I started at the top. This to be a little bit offset. I started with my first page. Doesn't really matter if you start at the first page or the second. I'm gonna find the middle of my signature here, and I'm going to go ahead and place this down in my book. I think I'm going to cut this off the edge here, just so it can be a different centered width between the first two holes. And I'm going to place my seam binding. Now it's a different width. I'm going to start playing around with the edges. And hold on to it. Okay. Now it has a different edge effect to it instead of what the other pages have on them. And because of the children, I think I'm going to want to fold this and have this maybe stick out a little bit further than the others because I want them on the same page. Then what I'm going to do is but look, I don't have the same height. That's going to give a little bit of interest. Thread this over to the next hole. I'll tuck that in there. Back through the back side. We're just going to keep building the layers. Do my second signature. Let's go back to some of our other pages that we had previously. I had some of this from prior projects. These are directional papers, so I want to make sure that I am cutting it the way that I want the text to read in this case. Now I'm going to just fold me a little flap here, a little 1/2 inch flap. You can score it. And I'm going to figure out from the outside. And I'm gonna just make a little end on here so that I can thread it through. So here's the final little album using the Schoolhouse memories. This is my front cover. Very simple, my spine, my back page. Here is the seam binding, which I used for the signatures to be included in this little mini junk journal. Now, here is the front inside cover. I added some stickers, used some little tiny attacher. I have a flap here. Here's some of the cut aparts from the collection. I just use it as a tuck spot here with one of the ephemera pieces. Big spot for a photo. Then we have our signature that starts here, our first one. Some of that paper. I just use odds and ends out of my scrap pile from my stash to embellish here. This is from the collection. You have another tag from the collection there. Page out of the book that I showed. A little die cut here, circular die cut, and this is one of the ephemera pieces. There's another page from the collection there. And I have this song. Turn this over. I have a piece from the collection that is I just folded it up as a tri-fold, tucks underneath. Got the books, another tag here. That's another little, so just journaling spot. That's a little tri-fold. Okay. Now's the time that we're going to tighten these. A little apple piece by pulling this taut. Collection. Here's the other side. I just made this a little flap. And that little flap can just tuck right into this little mini pocket here from the ephemera piece. Tight enough, just fun, so that they can. Piece from the collection here, the paper. Still maneuver in here, but they're not going to fall out. Maybe use a white gel pen for some notes. And then we're going to tie. Here's a tag from my stash of something that I created. On this outside. Believe in your daydreams. Here's another ephemera piece. And we have another piece of that music book. Hello there from the collection. Or a bow, either way. Flap here. Whichever you prefer. And a piece from the collection. There's that bicycle, very cute. It's small, and then I'll put a little dangle on the outside here. So just made this into a little belly band, and it has the flap there just by gluing at 2 spots. This is on the back side of that tag. Just like so. And a little piece right here just for interest, noteworthy. In the middle. And then you have this flap on the back side. I'll glue down 3 sides to this strip of black cardstock just to create a little mini pocket, just a tuck spot. You keep feeding stuff underneath. I just tore off. Some doodads that I made and had in my stash. And that's it. To add I hope you've enjoyed this little mini junk journal. Until next time, everyone, happy crafting, you all. Bye. The key is to make sure that you have burnished this though, and you'll start working it into place. The other thing with the flaps or